Chapter 14 of Fairylands of the South Seas. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Mike Vendetti, MikeVendetti.com. Fairylands of the South Seas by James Norman Hall and Charles Nordhoff. Chapter 14. In the Valley of Vaitia. It is not easy to analyze the magic which cousins every traveler into believing that he is the first to see Tahiti with clear eyes. One feels that it is made up of nature, in a mood of unearthly loveliness, of a sense of ancient and unalterable life, of a realization that strange beliefs persist under a semblance of Christianity, of the lure of a race whose confidence the white man can never fully gain. The mail steamers, the wireless, the traders, the scattering of French officials, these things are a mere play of shadows on the surface. Even the churches, I was tempted to say, but the church plays more than a shadowy part in the life of the native whose religion, at the present day, is a singular blending of Christian doctrine and old heathen belief. The Tahitian reads his Bible, he has no other book, and sings loudly every Sunday in church, but the dead are still things of horror in his mind. Sorcerers, masquerading as doctors, still carry on a brisk trade, and Tau, the great-headed, is still a living presence in the valley of Panuru. When the people of the Society Islands accepted Christianity a century ago, they did so with reservations, of which the missionaries perhaps were not aware. Here and there, as at Faery on Moorea, there was a burning of idols, but a great mass of material, old gods and heathen weapons, was stored in secure hiding-places among the hills. Today, after 3 generations of increasing European influence, hundreds of natives know of these caves and repair to them for purposes of their own. Yet a white man might spend his life on Tahiti without a glimpse of a sinnet-bound ororo or a slender ironwood spear. My friend Arima is typical. The widow of a Yankee skipper, the owner of a neat wooden villa in Papatee, where she appears regularly on her way to church, in shoes, stockings, and a black silk gown. She finds it necessary, from time to time, to cast off the unnatural manners of Europe and live as she was meant to live, to be herself, an elderly and delightful savage. When the mood comes, she closes the villa in Papatee, gathers the willing members of her family, and repairs to her native house, far off on the peninsula of Taiapu. The house of Arima stands on a river bank, shaded by a pair of mango trees, dark green and immemorially old. The roof is thatched with braided fronds of coconut. Breezes play through the lofty single room, bare of furniture and floored with mats spread on white coral gravel, leveled and packed. Past the veranda on which the family sleeps through the warm hours of the day, the river flows out gently to the sea, a broad still water, deep and glassy clear, peopled with darting shoals of fish, mullet, young pompano, and natto, the trout of the South Seas. Opposite the river mouth the reef is broken by a pass, through which the steady lines of combers sweep in to crash and tumble on the bar. Morning and afternoon the breakers are alive with naked children, shouting and glistening brown in the sunlight as they ride the waves. Inland, the valley marking the river's course is lost in a maze of broken and fantastic peaks. Seaward, bordering the green and blue of the lagoon, the snowy line of the reef stretches off endlessly, and beyond a 3-league expanse of bright sea, the headlands of Tahiti Nui rise in vast swelling curves up and up to the perpetual clouds which veil the heights. Under a bright sun at midday, when the palm-tops toss to the trade which paints the lagoon, in the deep passes and over the patches of sandy bottom, with ruffled sapphire and emerald, and sets the white-caps to dancing beyond the reef, or in the calm of night, with the moon hanging low over the pinnacles of basalt, when the polished surface of the lagoon is broken by the plunge and swirl of heavy fish, and native songs, rising and falling in savage cadences, float out across the water. It is a place not easily forgotten. It was still dark when we rose, Marie and I. The brothers of Marie had returned from the reef, and the ovens behind the cook-house were smoking. for in these places the hour of the day's first meal is set by the return of the fishermen. I took one shuddering plunge into the river, dressed myself in a shirt, a waistcloth, and a pair of hobnailed boots, and squatted with the rest to consume a fresh-caught mackerel and a section of breadfruit, dipped in a common bowl of sauce. Maurice sucked his fingers and stood up, calling to the dogs. Erema glanced at me over the back of a large fish she was gnawing, holding it with both hands. "Go, you two," she said. "You stay," replied Maurice, as she turned to take the path to the mountains. The oceanic tongue possesses no other words for parting. We followed the river across the flatlands of the coast. Dawn was flushing in the east. The profile of lofty ridges, fern-clad and incredibly serrated, grew sharp against the sky. The mynas were awakening. From the thick foliage of orange and mango trees came their extraordinary morning chorus, 1,000 voices, whistling, screaming, and chattering that it was time the assembly broke up for the foraging of another day. In one place, where a turn of the path brought us suddenly to the edge of a still reach of water, a pair of native ducks, Anis speculacosa, rose vertically on beating wings and sped off over the palm tops. A little further on, where volcanic boulders began to appear through the alluvial soil, and the river leaped and foamed over the first rapids, a family of Tahitian jungle fowl, led by a splendid burnished cock, sprang out of the grass and streamed away in easy, rapid flight towards the hills. The dogs bounded forward and stopped, whining as they watched the wild chickens dwindle to speeding dots. The groves of coconut palms and open pasture land were behind us now. The valley was narrowing, hemmed in by 1,000-foot cliffs to which a tangle of vegetation clung. The river became a torrent, boiling and waist-deep, plunging over cataracts, roaring down dark rapids under a roof of matted trees. Giant hibiscus a yard through, too remote to tempt the axe of the canoe-builder, candlenut, Barringtonia, and mape. The island chestnut with boles like fluted columns of a temple. The trail wound back and forth across the river, over the trunks of fallen trees, around masses of rock tumbled from the cliffs above, mounting higher and higher into the heart of the island. Once, as we stopped to rest, I looked back and caught a glimpse of the sea, a wedge of blue, far behind us and below. The dogs had begun to range ahead, for they knew that any moment we might start a sounder of wild pig. I was growing tired. It was not easy to follow Maurice at his own gait. He walked with the rapid, springing tread of a mountain man. When he stooped to clear a low, branching limb or loped off a section of creeper with an easy swing of his machete, I admired the play of muscles on his back, rippling powerfully under the smooth brown skin, silken and unblemished, unless it be by scars. The skin of these people is not like ours, but softer and closer in texture, seeming like marble to glimmer with reflected light. The gorge grew narrower. We rounded a buttress of jointed basalt and came suddenly into the light and open of a lonely valley, a quarter of a mile wide and twice as long, set high above the sea and hemmed in by untrodden ridges. It lay here uninhabited and forgotten, in a silence broken only by the roar of savage cataracts and the far-off bellowing of wild bulls. Yet man had been here. Along the base of the cliffs we found the terraced stone of his dwellings, the blocks of volcanic rock, pried apart by the roots of huge old trees. Maurice was squatting on his heels beside me, contemplating in silence these relics of an older time. Finally he turned his head. "Those stones are very old," he remarked. "They have been here always, since the beginning. Men placed them here and men slept on them, but not the men of my people." My thoughts dwelt on the old idle tales I had heard of the lizard men, of the dark-skinned aborigines, the Manahomi, said to have been in possession of the land when the eyes of Polynesian voyagers first rested on cloudy Orofena. There were other tales, too, of a later day, of a tribe of men dwelling in the valleys, neither tasting fish nor setting foot on the beach except when, at certain intervals, they were permitted to come down to worship by the sea. Even today it needs no effort of the imagination to see two distinct types among the island people, men and women of the kind one considers